Hey guys, welcome to Indie Game Hustle. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a basic game object directly from Blender and import it into Bakin. We're basically going to create a very simple game object. We're going to texture it, and then we're going to bring it into Bakin, and it's all going to work the way we imagine it's going to work. So basically, it should have its scale, and you should be able to import it in properly without any errors too. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and first open up Blender. Now this is probably the first time I've ever done like a Blender-ish tutorial. And so, yeah, so cool. Blender's cool. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so here we go. We have a cube here. So to get started, let's go ahead and delete this cube. And what we're gonna do is go ahead and hit add, and then we're gonna do cube here. And so now we have our wonderful mesh that we just created, and we spent many hours modeling this cube. This is the perfect cube, but we have to make a couple other changes to it, like changing its dimensions. So I'm gonna change its dimensions. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is just simply set its location to be kind of right where I want it. All right, perfect. And so we kind of zoom in and kind of see that. All right, so now we've spent many hours modeling this cube. What is the next process for you as a 3D modeler? Well, you probably need to UV edit it, right? We want to go ahead and UV this game object. So I'm going to go over to the UV editing tab in Blender. Okay, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and select my faces tool here. And I know this isn't a Blender tutorial per se, but this is just walking you through. This is the assumption that you're going to kind of look at other places for other Blender tutorials and kind of take all that amazing knowledge that you put together and you go, oh, this is how you do it. But anyway, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to select this. Now, for instance, as you can see, I'm kind of selecting this and I'm not getting the back here, but I want that. So if you're running into that issue, you can hold down the middle mouse. If you don't have a lot of space, slide this over and then go ahead and do an X-ray. And I'm gonna select everything. And so now we have that. Okay, cool. So we can start UVing this, but I just realized I need a texture for this low poly object. So let's go ahead and assign a material to this game object before we actually UV it. All right. So the thing is, what I'm going to do is go ahead and just go back into my layout. And I'm just going to go to object mode, select it. I'm going to go here on the right side, and I'm going to select this material. I'm going to create new material. I'm going to name it something like amazing cube. Amazing cube. And then on the base color, I'm going to select this, and it's going to open up this box. And under texture, I want to do image texture. And then for open, you want to assign a texture. So I'm going to go to my computer, Blender assets, walls, and I'm going to go ahead and select this color palette. Okay, and this is where I basically have my color palette for my low poly stuff. So I'm going to select it, hit open. And so now that has been assigned to this material, and this material has then been assigned to this game object. And if you want to see that material, you can go ahead and hover over these little spheres here, click on this one, and then you can see that that has been applied. The material, then the texture on the material. Great, perfect. All right, so now let's go back into UV editing. These are just layouts, by the way. So up here, these different tabs are basically different layouts. And you can change the different modes, but really these layouts are just like layouts. So you can change this if you want to, sculpting if you want, but they kind of have a sculpting layout for you. But in this case, UV editing layout has the UV editing tool, and then you can see your object on the right side. So what I'm going to do is select this game object. There's all my faces that I want to UV. Okay, and here is this. So as you can see, there is the texture that has been applied to that material. And so what we want to do is UV this game object. Now we can do an unwrap, and it just unwraps it, but because it's technically already unwrapped, it's just a cube with 6 sides. But you can do other things to it, right? You can do mark seam if you're selecting the edges. You can do all types of stuff. We're not getting into UVing, but if you want, you can do a smart UV project, and you can change some settings and hit OK, and then maybe you have a different type of layout there. All right, so in this window, I'm going to scale by holding down selecting the S key on the keyboard, and I'm going to select this like this. Now, if you want to slow this down, you can hold down the Shift key to kind of get a bit more accurate. So you can do that. You can click and then hit S, and you can kind of ease it in. And then I'm going to go ahead and get to the Move tool, and then I'm going to click here. And then I'm going to scale this up like so. And then now we have this here. And so now we've UV'd this game object, and to see it, I'm going to go to my viewport shading option, and there you have it. Awesome. And we can see these lines, I believe it's because we have the X-ray on, but there you have it. Awesome. So now we've modeled an amazing cube. We have UV'd and then textured this thing, right? So now our goal is to export this directly into Bakin. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to go back into my layout here, and this is going to basically be in an object mode. Okay. And so we have this. So what I want to do is go to File, Export, and then I'm going to go to FBX. All right. Now, keep in mind that texture that I had, you want to make sure that texture is located basically where you're going to export your FBX. So the texture and the FBX are kind of in the same location. Now mine is already there, so it should technically work. But if, say for instance, you were doing texture painting in Blender and then you created, you know, all of that stuff there, you might want to export that texture to that location. Now, somebody can more than welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's how you do it. I'm new to Blender, so forgive me if my information isn't as accurate as it should be. All right, cool. All right, so we're gonna go to File, Export, and then FBX. Cool. So on the right side here, we have some settings we want to set up. But what I'm going to do is actually go to my preset, and I have a Bakin preset here. And so what I'm going to show you here is that you want to have any object that you have selected, you want to just have selected objects. Unless you're trying to like export the whole scene, I would recommend just exporting what is necessary. So selected objects, and then you can have empty, armature, mesh. Your scale, you want to make sure that's to a 0.01, local, -z forward, etc. These things here. For the geometry, you want to make sure that triangulate faces is checked, because it's going to check for that, I believe, in Bakin. So you don't want to get any errors. And then all of this stuff here, I think, is pretty set to default. Cool. All right. So once you do that, you want to go ahead and hit Export FBX. And what we want to do is go to a location. So I have this Bakin assets folder and walls. And so I have my amazing cube. So I'm going to go ahead and select that because I've already exported this before multiple times. And so now I'm going to rename my thing, name it Amazing Cube, and hit Export FBX. All right, cool. So now we're done in Blender, right? So now all we got to do is go into Bakin. All right, so we're in Bakin. It's beautiful. So now we just need to go into resources. And inside your resources, you have like different folders here, different areas. We want to go into 3D stamps right here at the top. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and just go add. All right. And so now in terms of that, I'm going to add, I'm going to go to my local files. And if you don't have like your location, if you're not in the right folder where you've created a location where you're exporting your assets, you can copy and paste the file path directly here from your PC directly into this, and then it will take you straight here. All right, so there's my amazing cube. So something else important to note, you want to go ahead and have your scale to a 0.5. And that should bring it in to everything to kind of fit within the Bakin scaling. And I'm sure there's other ways to go about it because I've tested this multiple times and there's multiple ways you can approach this. You can actually fix it in Blender and then you don't even have to change this possibly, but I find this might be the simplest way to go. So do that and hit add and exit. All right, cool. So we got a message here. It's going to create some IDs. It's going to create some things here. We're going to hit OK. All right, cool. So now we have our amazing cube. It's going to be in our 3D stamp section. It's not in a folder. It's just kind of at the root. Okay, and more importantly, look at that. Now we have this 3D cube with this amazing texture that we created as well. And on the right side, we have the graphic. So the graphic, I believe in Bakin, is pretty much the object, right? Like the 3D object, okay? And then they have these other things like sub-graphics. I have not touched any of those things yet, but I'll probably get into that as I come across things. I'm only really gonna talk about the things that I've at least have experience using. Let's see what else we got. We got simple collision, so that's pretty important. So we have the shape box. So if you want to change the collision to something that you've created, then you can have a different mesh for the collision. So as I selected mesh, the collision is no longer visible because there is none. But as you can see, mesh is here. So if you select mesh, I could actually select my amazing cube as the mesh and hit add and exit. And so now that cube is acting as my collision object. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind when you're modeling like complex things in Blender, but your collision doesn't need to be so complex. So you can actually model out a mesh just for your collision. Does that make sense? All right, cool. All right, and so we have other things here. I'm not familiar with those, but then you have your materials used. So this is the material here that's on this object. All right, and so what I'm going to do is go into 3D stamps, and then I'm just gonna go to models. So now this is taking it and breaking it down by all the different like components of it. So we have the object here, we have the material here, and we have the texture here. All right, so the material, if you're familiar with like Unity and stuff, is gonna be all the shading and whether or not it has like outlines to it, kind of like your anime or your comic outlines, things like that. You can change the metallic rate or the specular or the roughness. Is this metal? Is it paper? You know, whatever. And then there's other things here too, like scrolling, and I don't really know what these things do, but you can imagine like if you have like a water texture, you can probably play with the speed of this. So that's kind of cool. So there's all types of amazing little features in here that you can utilize, but this is not useful for this particular object. Cool. All right, and what else do we have here? So yeah, there's some other settings here. If you don't want to cast shadows, things like that. Cool. All right, and then you have your texture, and it has different things as well. So you can play with these settings as needed. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and click OK. All right, and so it's gonna update. And so now on the right side in your objects section, we're gonna click on basic or reserve to see where our object is. And it should be in here. If it is not, then we'll go back and see. All right, so it looks like it's in the uncategorized section. And the reason of that is, I'll show you, if we go into resources and we go here, as you can see, it's not categorized. It's not in a folder. So if we want to go ahead and create a folder for this, we can just call it like custom stuff, just for that. And you can take this and just pop it inside your custom stuff folder. You're good to go, and hit OK. All right, so now it's not an uncategorized. Now you've made your own folder with your own models, all of your own assets, And you can imagine how deep you can go, right? You can create houses, a folder called house, and then a folder called doors, and floors, etc., whatever you need. Cool. So now we have this game object. So all we have to do is select it. And as you can see, it has this icon, and we can simply click it. And there is our wonderful, wonderful model that we spent many hours doing, with its texture and everything ready to go. Awesome. So now all you got to do is hit play, and we do title skip. And there you have it. And so now you have your model, it has its collision, and there you have it. It's awesome. How is that for perfection? Yes. Now, what will you make with Blender and import it into Bakin? Cool. I hope that was a pretty simple tutorial video for you guys. I do these really for me so that I don't forget how to do these things. And so hopefully they're useful for you guys as you build whatever it is that you're building. All right. Well, I will see you guys in the next video.